I'm thinking again about the transparent society, and particularly how warfare might be carried out in that society. Just if you've never seen any of these videos before on this transparent society, I'm borrowing that term from David Brin, who defines a transparent society as one in which surveillance is omnipresent. There are cameras everywhere, and not only that, but the data from those surveillance devices is not sent to some kind of Orwellian Big Brother security headquarters. It's made democratic, so it's publicly available to everyone who wants access to it. That's the idea. And then, David Brin spins out some consequences from that rendering of transparent, so where society becomes transparent to itself. And I'm picking up with that and just spinning out some ideas of my own. But yeah, what would warfare be like in a transparent society? And are we at least slightly more transparent than we were as far as warfare is concerned? I think there's no doubt we are. There are, for obvious technical reasons, there are no good images of the Boer War or the Crusades or the Spanish, well, not Spanish Civil War, the 100 Years' War, Battle of Agincourt. There isn't any good footage of this. There's the Bayeux Tapestry, which relates the events of 1066, the Battle of Hastings, but that's not very good documentation. So certainly technologically, at least, the availability of transparent warfare becomes more possible. And I think that certainly has been the case in the last century or so, not just because of technology, although that's significant, but also because of the recognition that technology can do that and the demand that it do it quicker and more effectively and cheaper. I suppose I'm thinking of a number of notable events here. I mean, certainly if I can precede technology, just to go back to the Boer War, I guess nobody at the time, and very few people until recently, realised that the British troops during the Boer War used to carry out a torture technique on their captives, which is basically the waterboarding. Now that wasn't available, that information wasn't made available. It was documented in the form of drawings and sketches of these events taking place, but they didn't appear in our newspapers. They obviously didn't appear on our screens because we didn't have any, and they only really came to light as kind of historical documents relatively recently. But jumping forward a bit, the atrocities that were carried out in First and Second World War were much more available, albeit after the fact, either in the form of the poems that the war poets in the First World War wrote, or some photographic documentation after the fact. But again, it was after the fact, and in some cases quite a long way after the fact, and kind of romanticised and historicised, so it became historical documents rather than live documents, but nevertheless significant. And then when you skip forward to something like the Vietnam War, the recording of atrocities there, and again I'm thinking specifically of the My Lai massacre, which is probably the poster boy event of this type. That broke during the course of the war itself. The war wasn't over when that particular atrocity came to light, and affected how the war was viewed very significantly. And then moving forward again, something like the wars in the former Yugoslavia a few years back, when largely between Serbs and Croats, but other kind of factions involved as well. I mean, that was, well, for me at least, that was the first war that was also documented by citizen journalists. There was plenty of blogs going on both sides of that one, even though it was relatively early days in the internet. And on online radio stations. I mean, I certainly remember listening to Radio Free Serbia, which was broadcasting whilst the non-governmental, non-controlled radio broadcasting on the internet, while the various events were taking place. It didn't capture all the atrocities, and again, all that stuff came out later. But there was a sense that you were in touch with the people of the warring nation whilst the war that was going on. And that's completely different to how it usually works. Iraq War I, the one that W.H. Bush was involved in, as soon as that war was declared, all communication with Iraq shut down. I mean, I remember trying to phone someone in Iraq actually the day after, it became kind of general knowledge that the troops were going in, and it was just impossible. You couldn't get a phone line through. all the communications were severed. You couldn't do that. Obviously, that was early 90s, before the internet put an end to all that. While the second Iraq war was going on, it was perfectly possible to get, to read the blogs of Iraqi bloggers and to see footage and to all that kind of stuff, to talk to people there. So you never lost contact with the citizenry of your supposed enemy state. But I mean, not perfect transparency by any means, but at least the beginnings of it. Something like the Abu Ghraib stuff, the abuse that was carried out by prisoners in Abu Ghraib. Those pictures became generally available. Very soon after they were taken, and even the recent stuff that was been released on WikiLeaks of some bending of the rules of engagement is, it's only 3 or 4 years after it happened. It sounds like a long time, it is, but at least it's happening. At least it is. Those leaks they're not being plugged. They're becoming more available. Okay, so there is for me at least, I think there is an increasing transparency in evidence there. So what's the effect of that on warfare? Well, I think one of the things is that kind of historicisation process can't happen. Those old romantic pictures of soldiers waterboarding some colonial native in South Africa or whatever from the Boer War. I mean, or something like Goya's Disasters of War series, really traumatic pictures. I mean, they're as I say, they're historicised, but that historicisation also distanced them. You don't feel emotional about them because they look like museum artifacts. That no longer happens. The time frame is such, and the rapidity by which those things become available is you're not allowed to historicise them. It's contemporary with you. So I think that's one effect. Also, I think the kind of rules of engagement would have to include now the awareness that surveillance is happening, and not only that, but surveillance is expected. I think it's. I think if something like what's he called? Thomas Aquinas? No, the other guy. The guy who wrote about the just war, St. Augustine. I think if St. Augustine was writing about the just war and developing the concept of the just war today, he'd probably make it transparent. He'd say, for a war to be just, it has to be fought in public. It has to be fought with the lights brightly on, all the cameras switched on, and with every communication publicly available. It isn't enough that it be just, it has to be seen to be just by everybody who hasn't even the slightest interest. So I think that would be an effect I would imagine seeing. Certainly I'd distrust blanks in communication. Any, redacted communications automatically assume that the redaction covers up some deleted expletive, but more likely some secret they don't want you to know. So yeah, transparency is becoming, I would hope, becoming the norm and becoming the expected behaviour of ethical agents of all kinds. Ethical governments, but ethical militaries as well, operate in the broad light of day. But also I would expect, personnel to act like that. If I was that guy in the helicopter, or those guys in those helicopters in Iraq, shooting what they assumed were and thought were insurgents, but who turned out to be at least partially just civilians, non-combatants, Reuters journalists, people carrying cameras, not guns. If I'd have been one of those soldiers and I was absolutely sure that everything I said and did was going to be witnessed by the world, and I was going to be judged according to, in the courtroom of public opinion, based on the transparency of the media that was gazing over my shoulder the whole time, I'd be much more reluctant to press the button. I'd be much more careful about when to say nice, when someone got killed, or to giggle when a tank rolled over a body of a human being, or just to, just to request permission to engage. I think I'd be a bit more careful about that. And if I was a military leader, trying to gain the moral high ground, trying to win the war of public opinion as well as the war against some other nation, I would make sure that was in my training. I know, at least I've been told, that the My Lai massacre that took place in Vietnam is included within basic training for troops as an example of when it is wrong to obey orders and when it is wrong to go off-piste in your military campaigning. You know, it's included as an example of bad practice. I would also say that you know, within military training you would have to include the necessity for an awareness of transparency, that someone is watching the whole time. So you have to, it's not only, you don't only have to be a good soldier, you have to be a self-evidently, transparently good soldier, operating in the clear light of day. Anyway, maybe.